Hello. I just want to go over some of the things that are basic to the course for those of you who couldn't make it when I appeared up in Reading last week and spent time just really going through the syllabus. That's all I want to do. And here, really, I'm just repeating in one way with what I sent you over the weekend in respect to the assignments that you've got, and making some general statements, because what I've done with this course is now, I inherited this course from Professor Strong, and it's the third time that I've taught it. And what I've tried to do each time is I've tried to simplify it and make it more adaptable and amenable to learning. For example, in the you may notice that there's some groups that are associated with people being split up into groups, whereas I've kept it where we don't have any groups. We have just basically a single group, so you respond to anyone within the whole group. Originally, I had different groups because on the first time I taught the course, I had over 27 students, so I split them up into 3 different groups. But the next time I had much less students, and then I had problems when students would not actually post material on time, which meant that those who were in that group then were disadvantaged because they couldn't get a response in to that student who had not posted his or her material on time when they should have done, or there was no one to respond to because the group faded out. So there's only one person left in the group. So given the nature of our group, that we're really only a small group, I've kept it to one particular group. So in other words, then I've put a forum which you can post your replies to that forum, and I can see everything and follow it in terms of what you're doing as you respond to other students. It's a singular response. In other words, then you respond to what other students have done in respect to the particular assignment. That, I think, is a simplification of the course. And the second thing I've done is that, when I've taught this before, I've had it where, for example, when you're doing the forum conversations and you have to respond to students who have posted a question, then in the past I've had you make 3 responses, because that's what I inherited. No, there's 3 responses of 250 words each. And I've simplified that down so you now only make 1 response of 750 words. In other words, it's the same basic requirements that have been part of this course as it was constructed, but I think that it's easier because you can't say very much in 250 words, whereas 750 words gives you the opportunity to respond to what somebody is saying. I'm thinking of the conversations. Perhaps I'm jumping ahead of myself here a little bit, because then let me just go through it very, very basically. The summary of the week assignments. The quizzes are all open from April the 29th, and you must do the quiz as you read the chapter in the book in the Conversations by Alister McGrath. Those are the 2 books that are necessary. Alister McGrath's book on the basics of theology, and Armstrong's book on the patron saints. That's basically the bread and butter of what we do. So you take those quizzes each week, and then you answer in respect to the book by Alister McGrath. You do the basic conversations, which is what? Is that by Tuesday you post a question. The question has to be a question obviously related to the chapter, something that interests you. And it doesn't have to be, you can't, I don't want you to do it in a single sentence. I think you need to explain it. But you can probably do it in less than 100 words in terms of the question that's provoked you, that then you put that online and then others can respond to that question. You post that question by Tuesday, and then by Thursday you do 1 response to the questions that somebody else has raised in the group of 750 words. And then finally you do a response to anyone who has responded to your question of a final response on the Saturday of 750 words. If I ever get in a situation where nobody has responded to your question, then you'll have to do a final response in respect to what you put. In other words, deeper thought. What I'm really looking for is thinking. In other words, not simply just parroting an idea, but you doing a little bit of research, a little bit of mental thought in respect to how you respond in this assignment. That's the first one. The second one is quite similar in the sense the Saints Forum, where what you do is you then read the material, a chapter in the book, and what has Armstrong done, but he's done it in such a way, he's basically a Baptist, and he's picked a whole gamut of different, I'd call them theologians, devotional scholars, mystics in the Christian tradition, both men and women, from the Orthodox and the Catholic and the Protestant faith. And some of them you'll find interesting, some of them not so interesting, but there's a whole gamut then of perspectives. And he's written in a very positive way. For example, he's a Protestant, and the first one that you're dealing with this week is Anthony, who has become the father figure of Christian monasticism that's very strong in the Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church, but not so much in the Protestant Church. So it'd be interesting to see how he basically does the perspective in respect to how to crack open who Anthony is. And you'll be looking at that, and then what you do is, of course, is that you construct your paper on it, and then you make one response to the other people's essays by Saturday of 750 words. Now, here's the key. You want to get good marks, right? You get good marks by doing what the syllabus asks you to do. It's as simple as that. In other words, I suggest what you do is that you have the syllabus with you all the time when you're actually responding to the Conversations Forum or the Saints essay. So when you're doing the Saints essay, you look and you see the 4 requirements. I think it's 4 that are asked of you. Simply a bio, and then an evaluation, and then the last 2, and here's what I found in the courses in the past, is that students easily get into doing an outline in respect to what this particular scholar or theologian is all about, his or her life history and so forth, their main ideas, but very little concrete analysis of it, of what you think. What do you think about it? That's what I'm looking for. Is what do you agree with and what you disagree with. That's stated in there in terms of the syllabus requirements. So you look at that and you take the easy part is to do the bio of it and list that out. The harder part is to actually think and say to yourself, what do I think about this? Now I'll make some comments on the way. I'll give you some ideas in respect to how to approach this when I see the answers that you've given. But I want you to adopt that. I want you to notice that Armstrong is very accommodating to these different scholars and devotional mystics and so forth. And yes, you are to be, but you are to be critical in the sense of what tradition you're coming from. Or even if you're not coming from a particular tradition at all, but you're somewhat of a secularist who's exploring Christianity, then look at these things of what you think about monasticism. One easy example is Anthony went into the wilderness, the desert, for 20 years and lived by himself and came back as sort of a hero figure who was the father of what deep spirituality is, which has then led to the whole notion of monasticism, which was rejected in Protestantism in the 16th century as a viable way before God. What do you think about that and what Anthony did and so forth? All right. So the idea primarily of what I'm saying is for you to think in respect to these assignments. Same with Engage a Text. Simply at the end, you just see if at the end of the chapter you look at the Engage a Text material and you write what you think in terms of what the issue that is being produced in the chapter. I'm looking for thinking. That's how you'll do really well. Surely you can't fail this course. You only fail the course when you don't do any of the assignments. That's it. If I can be as blunt as I can from that standpoint. But if you want to do well in it, then I encourage you to think. And I've posted a material this week on how to write a good paper. Always be thinking of it in terms of basically an argument that you're making. When you're making 750 words. In other words, it's in paragraph form. You have a thesis of what you want to say, and then you unlock that thesis. And then you provide a conclusion at the end of it. And this is, it's from you. It's a way, it's an academic setting. So therefore, from that standpoint, although it involves personal faith, it doesn't mean that we can talk casually to one another when we write academically. So then you avoid casual language, you avoid slang and so forth. You avoid as much as you can cliches. Anthony's view of the holy life is really weird. What on earth does that mean? Anthony is cool. But, no, you can get away with that when you're talking with somebody in a cafe, but you can't when you're actually writing academically, because there's a difference between casual language and what formal language is. For example, I spent 12 years working with homeless people, and I had a middle-class notion of what it meant for homeless people to get an opportunity to have a job, say at Home Depot. They would go for an interview. And I thought, oh, they'll get the job because they'll know what to do as they go into the interview. Because as you know, presumably as a middle class person, as you go into an interview, you prepare yourself in terms of dress, formality, you engage in eye contact. You're there, if they say to you at the end of the interview, well, do you have any questions for us? Yes, you've got 1 or 2 questions up your sleeve and so on. And you're looking, you have eye contact with everyone, and you're talking in such a way that convince them that you want the job. But frequently I found with the homeless people in my previous ministry here in Chico for over 11 years with the Jesus Center, is that people who had a low socioeconomic background, and who were introduced to a drug-style life when they were teenagers or even before that. They hadn't got the role model of what it meant to exist and function within society in terms of what you have to do to get a job in a place like Home Depot. They would walk into the interview and not necessarily dressed well, but walk in there and say, oh, hi everybody, how you doing? You don't do that. You're not going to get the job, you see. They have to be trained in what I'd call a middle-class format. And that's the nature of much of the way that we function within our society, in that sort of productive sense, that what you're doing, you're studying for a degree, you're ready to go. So therefore, when you write formally. Essentially, what this teaches you is that in 20 years, when you're the head of a company that's got 5,000 employees and you send out a memo, that you can't have X number of employees phoning you back regarding the memo saying, what did you mean by so-and-so? Because it's got to stand by itself on its own legs. It's got to have authorial intent, as a scholar would say, within its own setting without recourse to going back and asking the author, what did you mean by so-and-so? Therefore, you write in what I'd call formal register language, which is in the academic vein, excuse me, using Turabian, APA, MLA methodology. You write not casually and you cull. There's a saying that I learned a generation ago when I was learning radio broadcasting, which is, a word saved is a kingdom gained. Whenever you've written anything, don't just send it or print from the monitor, because there's still lots of mistakes in it. Print it from the monitor and then read it and then cull it. When I write academically, I write lots of stuff that's just garbage or verbiage or that's fluff. Let me say, Anthony of Egypt was a really important figure in the growth of Roman Catholic monasticism. He's very interesting in the way that now I write stuff like that and then I say to myself, come on, Bill, how is he important? Why is he interesting? And then I write specifically what is the case. In other words, then I cull the generalities and get down to specifics to make my argument. That's what a good essay is in respect to the specifics of what I'm looking for. It addresses the questions that's in the syllabus, and at the same time then avoids the cliches and the slang, the weird, cool words that you can get away with in casual conversation, but you can't when you're writing in an academic vein. And you can still, where you're asked to bring out your own personal faith and transformation, you can still do that in a formal setting that is encouraging to you and to me, the reader. All right. I think I've said enough there. Finally, the other papers that you have to do, which are the 4 reflection papers, which are really straightforward. A small amount of work that you have to do, the pilgrimage paper, then you have to interview somebody who is of a different faith, and then these are small papers, and then you have to go to your church or a church 4 times and do a record of their service, their theology based upon the basics of McGrath, and then an evaluation of what you think about it. That, and then the final paper is just basically in lieu of, there's no final exam. Instead, what you have is just really a self-reflection on the course and what it means to you. So that's fairly easy. The big paper, that you get it right at the end when all these other assignments are done. In other words, from 2 weeks through weeks 2 through 10, conversations forum, Saints forum, engage, a text forum. When that's over, then the big paper you have to do is on the question of suffering, and you've got resources in there to approach it that I've put in, as well as you look at other resources, and then you make your argument in respect to how you address the problem of suffering. I think from what I've said then, it's straightforward, so I'm hoping that will answer a lot of the questions that a number of you have asked me, and those of you who couldn't make it last week when I was in Reading. Thank you.